Hello viewers, this is the second part of the topic on Oracle Real Application Testing, or shortly RAT. In this second part, we are going to transfer and replay the workload in the target database which was captured in the source database. In the last tutorial, or part 1 of this topic, we captured the workload from our source database named catdb and created a zip archive of all the captured files along with the SQL tuning set. If you have not watched the first part, I suggest you watch that first for a better understanding of today's tutorial. In today's tutorial, we are going to transfer and replay the workload in our target database named RAT test 1. So I have established two toad sessions to the source and the target database to execute various SQL statements and show the results time to time, but mostly I will be using command prompt. Before we can replay the captured workload on target database, we need to make sure the application schema in the source database on which we are analyzing the performance of the database is also present in the target database. In our case, this application user is app user. And in the source database, that is the catdb, this application user has a few tables and indexes, and in the target database, that is RAT test 1, we don't have these objects and not even this user. So we have to bring this application user schema or the app user schema from the source database to the target database along with all its objects. Normally we do that using data pump export import if the schemas are small, say less than a few hundred GBs, or an arm and restore of the whole source database to the target database if it is large. You can also set up a golden gate replication from the source to the target database. The purpose is to make sure that the application schema in the source and the target database are structurally the same. In this tutorial, as our source schema named app user is very small, so we will be using a data pump export import from the source to the target database to bring this schema with all its objects. To do that, let's first create a data pump directory. We'll create this directory which will be pointing to the /temp physical folder in the host, and this temp exp directory object has been created which will be used by our data pump job. And I am simply pasting here the expdp command that I am going to use. The expdp user ID will be sys, directory will be temp exp, the directory that we just created in the previous step, the dump file and the log file, and the schemas. This is the most important parameter here because we are exporting the app user whole schema through this export job, and we are using the flashback time and the sys timestamp as parameter here to make the dump file consistent. And I'll simply copy this now and paste it in our command prompt. So this export job is actually exporting the app user schema with all its objects from the source database named catdb. Okay, so our export is just completed. Now we'll be importing this dump to our target database, that is the RAT test 1. So we'll first connect to the target database, and then we'll create the same directory object here as temp exp that we created in the source database. You can give it a different name, but just for simplicity I'm using the same command here to create the directory object. And now I am going to do an import of the dump file that we just exported. So let me explain the import command here. It's using the impdp command. User ID will be sys, directory the temp exp, dump file will be the file that we exported from the source, the log file name, and the schemas will be app user. The user or the schema that we exported from the source will be imported here using this impdp command. Now let's take it to the command prompt and I'm simply pasting it here and executing. Now our import has successfully completed without any errors. So now we can go and validate the structure of or the objects in the app user schema in the target database, and we can see that the same index and the tables are present in the app user schema in the target database. Now let's go back to the Linux prompt where we created a directory named redcap under Oracle users home directory, and we have put all the captcha related files, AWR snapshots, dump of the staging table having the SQL tuning set in this directory called redcap, and we created a zip archive of this directory named catdbcapture.zip. Ideally, we transfer this zip archive to the target system and unzip it to start our replay activities, but because our source and target databases are in the same host, so instead of transferring this zip file, we will simply unzip this zip file to a different directory so we do not overwrite the source files in the directory called redcap. Unzip -d ret rip catdbcapture.zip. So it is going to unzip this zip file to a directory called ret rip. So this ret rip directory is created. Let's go inside this. And there is another subdirectory with the same name created, and we don't need this subdirectory actually. So we will move all the files under this to the parent directory. So mv star and then we will get rid of this blank subdirectory. Next, we will connect to our target database using SQL prompt as sysdba, and we will create a directory object that will point to this ret rip location. So I'm using this command create or replace directory catdb replay as home oracle ret rip, and the directory object has been created. Now we'll grant read write privilege on this directory object to public. Next, we need to make sure that the target database is in archive log mode. So let's check the archive log mode is enabled, and yes, it is in archive log mode. And we also need to make sure that we have enabled flashback in this database, and then we have to create a guaranteed restore point. First, let's check if the flashback is enabled, and we see that the flashback is enabled. Next, we are going to create a guaranteed restore point in the target database. So create restore point grp before ret replay guarantee flashback database. So the guaranteed restore point created. Next, we need to import the SQL tuning set that we created in the source database. If you remember, we created an user named sts1 in the source database that has the staging table that contains this SQL tuning set. So before we can import the SQL tuning set or the staging table that contains the tuning sets, we need to create the sts1 user first in the target database. So I'll create this sts1 user in the target database with the same password and some grants. And this is just a temporary user, and you don't need this user later on after your replay is done. And we'll also grant connect create table, and additionally I am giving DBA privilege just to avoid any kind of privilege issues going forward. And as I said, this is a temporary user, and you don't have to keep this in the database once your replay activity is done. Next, we are going to import the staging table dump that contains the SQL tuning sets. So I'm using this impdp command. impdp user ID is sys, dump file is the staging table dump file for the SQL tuning sets, the log file, and the directory, that is the catdb replay we created just a few minutes back. So copy this and execute it in the command prompt. And the staging table dump has been successfully imported to our target database. Now let's connect to the target database using SQL prompt and see how many records are there in the staging table. And there are 3032 records in this staging table owned by STS1 user, which we just imported. Now the next thing is we have to unpack these SQL tuning sets from the staging table, and to do that we will use a PL SQL block that I am going to explain in the Toad window. So this is the PL SQL block we are going to use to unpack the SQL tuning set, and using the dbms SQL tune dot unpack stg tab underscore SQL set, and we are simply specifying the SQL set name, the SQL set owner, that is the sys, and some other parameters here, right? Like replace equal to true. If there is any existing SQL tuning sets, it will be replaced. And staging table name will be sts1 capture cat db, and the staging table schema owner is sts1. We will copy it and paste it in the command prompt. Set timing on, so that we know how much time it is taking, and it took just like less than a second. Next, we need to get some capture related information. That is nothing but the capture ID. And the PL SQL block that we are going to use is this one, the dbms workload capture dot get capture info, and we have to specify the directory name, and from there it will collect all the information along with the capture ID, and that is important for us. So I'll take this block and we'll paste it here, and it has given us all the information we need, that is the capture ID, which is 1 here. And this capture ID will be used in our subsequent commands. Next, we have to import all the AWRs that has been exported from our source database. To do that, we are going to use the PL SQL block that I am explaining here, and we are using the dbms workload capture dot import AWR procedure here, and we are specifying the capture ID there, and the staging schema name, and force cleanup equal to true, and we will simply copy it from here and paste it in our command prompt. And this procedure is going to take some time because it is importing all the AWR related information to the target database. Okay, so the PL SQL procedure successfully completed, and it has returned a DB ID equal to this. Now this DB ID is different than the DB ID that belongs to the target database. So this is coming from the source database, and we can validate this simply executing this command. And if you see that these two DB IDs are different, one belongs to the current database, that is the target database, and the another one is from the source database. Now we have to create a tuning task for the SQL tuning set, and we are going to use this command that I am pasting here. Just to explain, we are defining a variable, say vtask. This will hold the name of the task, and we are executing this dbms SQL PA, that is SQL Performance Analyzer, and create analysis task procedure for the SQL set name, SQL set catdb, with the date that we created in our source database, if you remember. And finally, we are printing the name of the task that we created. So let's copy it from here and paste it in the command prompt. And it has been successfully completed, and a task with the name task 294 has been created. We have to make a note of this task name because this is going to be used in our subsequent commands. Next, we need to create a script, that is a shell script, which will be actually executing this task in the background. So let's go back to our command prompt, and we are currently under this rat rip directory, and we are going to create one script, say with the name rat test before replay. So it is the database name. Before replay is just for our understanding .sh. Let's first specify the cell and a few other settings there. We are setting the database environment in the script so that it can connect to our target database. So the Oracle base, Oracle home, the library path, SID, unique name, TNS admin, and the path variable. And we are simply using the PL/SQL block here to be executed in the SQL prompt within this end of file tags. So what it is doing, it is using the DBMS SQL PA package, and it is executing the analysis task. And the task is nothing but the task underscore 294 that we just created in the previous step. And it's of execution type test execute, and execution name we are providing as before replay. And we are supplying some execution parameters here. So DBMS advisor.argument list, and we are providing only one argument here, the disable multi execution, which is true. Now save this file and change the mode to 775 so that we can execute it. Next, we will run this script in the background using the nohub command. So now this script is executing this task 294, and we are naming it as before replay. And this is going to run for a couple of minutes, and we can check the status of this task using this SQL query, that is the task name, execution name, status, execution end from the DBA advisor executions, where task name equal to task 294, and it says that it is completed. Now we can check how many objects have been created by this before replay task. So I'm using this query, select count star from DBA advisor objects, where task name equals to task 294 and execution name equals to before replay, and we can see that it has created 83 advisor objects. Now before we start our replay, there are a few more small steps involved, and the first of those, the process capture step. So we are executing one command called DBMS workload replay process capture, and the capture directory is catdb replay. So whatever capture information is there available in this catdb directory, it will process that. So we will run it, and it should take a few seconds. Yes, it is completed. And then we will run another command to initialize the replay using this command, DBMS workload replay dot initialize replay. And here the replay name we are supplying as catdb replay, and the replay directory is also catdb replay. In fact, you can choose a different name here, but I prefer to keep the same name just for easier understanding. And I'm going to execute it, and it has been completed. Next, we need to prepare the replay, and to do that we are going to use this command, DBMS workload replay dot prepare replay, and synchronization equal to false, and it has completed within a second. Usually in a real database environment, this prepare replay step takes a couple of minutes. Now we have to start some workload replay clients in the target system. And I'll show how we can create this or start these replay clients. And this is nothing but the WRC executable that is found under the bin directory of the Oracle Home. And the mode will be calibrate, and the replay directory is our directory that we created for keeping all our replay related files. Now press enter and it will give us some information and also giving us some workload characteristics that we captured, where the max concurrency was 2 sessions and the total number of sessions were 7. It is also giving some assumptions like 1 client process per 100 concurrent sessions is suggested. In our case, as it's very less, then 1 client process is enough for our purpose. So we are going to run 1 client process for the workload to be replayed, and that has to be done in the background using the nohub command. So what I am doing here, nohub Oracle Home bin WRC, and here we have to supply the password for one of the DBA users. In our case, the system user has the password red test1, so I am keeping it that way and running it. So this workload replay client is currently running, and we can check it using the job commands, and we can see that currently this workload replay client is running. And now actually we have to run our workload replay. So we'll come back to our SQL prompt again. Set timing on, and we will run our replay using the dbms workload replay.start replay procedure. So this start replay procedure has been successfully submitted and it is currently running. Now please remember that whatever amount of time we have used to capture the workload, this workload replay is going to run approximately for that amount of time. If you ran your capture for 15 minutes, then the replay will also run for 15 minutes. If you ran your capture process for an hour or 2 hours, then this replay process will also run for that long accordingly. Although in the first part of this video, I have run the capture process for just 15 minutes, actually it did not capture anything for that 15 minutes because it was a very short amount of time. And so I had to run the capture process again for like 1 hour or so that it actually captures something which can be replayed in the target system. So in this case, the replay process is also going to run for 1 hour. We can actually check the status of this workload replay using this query. So select ID, capture ID, name, start time, end time, status from the DBA workload replays, and currently there is only 1 replay which is in progress. So we can keep checking the status of this replay process, and it will run for the next 1 hour. After 1 hour, we'll check whether it has successfully completed or not. Let's check the status of the replay again. And yes, this time we can see that the status is completed. So viewers, with this, I would like to conclude today's episode. In the next or the third episode, which will be the final part of this topic, we will extract the comparison reports and make our performance analysis. So viewers, I hope you enjoyed the video and found it useful. Please hit the like button if you liked it and subscribe to my channel so you won't miss an episode in this series for the Oracle DBAs or similar educational videos that I am uploading every week.